The coffee's kicking in. Today, in our look at Python through kind of a boot camp approach, we're going to take a look at flow control, and we can divide that out into a couple of different areas. So we're going to go with the basics first, and then we'll pick up from there and go a little bit further into it on Thursday. First thing we want to look at is the different flow control, or the actual flow control statement, and look at the parts that it contains. So usually there is a condition that basically is going to equate to a true-false event. After that, there'll be a clause that once the condition's met, okay, what are we going to do? And we refer to this entire process as blocks of code. So we can have several different blocks of flow control code within our Python script. And it'll work very well for us, and it allows us to make decisions as we go through that script. Now, I just mentioned that one of the things that we need to remember is based on whether the condition is true or false will determine what happens. And you might think, depending on how much you know about if statements in Python, that if we had a flow control if statement evaluate false, then nothing would happen. But that's not necessarily true. And we'll take a look at that as we go through the lecture today. See if this will work. Okay. Blocks of code. Again, I need to remind you that Python works on indentation. And one of the nice things about PyCharm is the fact that it will automatically indent for us. So the actual block of code that we're looking at will begin with an indentation. A block of flow control code can contain other blocks of flow control code. You may have heard of this referred to as nesting. Jim Romani, who used to work with me out at Tinker on the Robbins Joya project, was the king of nesting flow control codes. He did one where we had, I think it was 123 nested if and while statements in a flow control statement. It went on for 4 pages. If you printed it out, you needed a road map and a compass to figure out what Jim was trying to do, but it actually worked, so we were proud of him for doing that. So we can nest our flow control as we go through. When does a flow control end? Well, a couple of different criteria that we can look at. If we're looking at just the programming part of it, when the indentation goes back to 0, that's the end of the flow control. The other thing we can look at is the indentation returns back to the containing blocks indentation. So this isn't actually the coding. This is what it looks like in PyCharm when we're working with it. Now, we've got several different options that we can look at with flow control. And these are the most common flow control statements and the ones we'll look at this week. The first one is the if statement. Pretty simple, evaluated true or false, and we can nest these as I just said. So that's sort of our basic flow control. Underneath our if statement, which gives us a little bit more flexibility, we can have an else statement or we can have an if-else statement. Now, they're not exactly displayed in the way that they're coded. We'll look at that in a second, but just for your edification and mine, we'll spell them out in English. Next we can look at, we'll look at this option on Thursday. This is the while loop. And a while loop gives us a little more flexibility in flow control than the if loop. And again, we'll take a look at that in more detail on Thursday. And then finally, the for loop. And a for loop lets us determine the number of repetitions we want to have happen with any flow control event that we create within Python. So Those three major types of flow control events are what we'll concentrate on this week, and pretty much throughout the textbook when we start in it, those will be the flow control options that we use. Again, the if statement is the most common, and it will execute when that if statement is evaluated as true. So if we look at the breakdown of that if statement within Python to learn the correct terminology, we're going to have a key word. That's going to be the if, or the else, or the else if part of the statement. We're going to have a condition, and that condition is what we are evaluating as true or false. This is on the very first line of our flow control statement. At the end of that very first line, and we'll look at the code here in a minute, what we will see is a colon. And that indicates to Python that's the end of the flow control statement. That's what we are evaluating. After that, then we'll have an indentation clause, and we'll begin what we want to have happen if that statement is evaluated true. Pretty simple. If we're going to do flow control, those of you who had Big John, this is probably a pretty simple chart. By the way, your little exercise from last Thursday is on my desk. I didn't get back to it after my meeting was over. I'll bring it in on Thursday. By and large, everybody did pretty good on that exercise. You guys go crazy, though, with flow control. So try to get you back to just do it kind of simply, all right? And simple is better as we go through it. So this would be a very simple, we look at a start, we look at an end. We're evaluating if the name variable equals Alice. Remember, double equal sign, and if true, print hi Alice as we go through. An else statement can be one of the members of our if flow control statement, and as we look at it, it's an option for the if clause. So if the if clause isn't evaluated true and is going to be implemented, then we can have an else statement. And normally what you'll find is the else statement is the option. If our if clause is evaluated false, then here's the option we want to do. Maybe we want to reinitiate it. Maybe we want the user to input more information and then loop back through it. Of course, we can't do that with an if clause. We'll look at that on Thursday. It's going to execute only when the if statement is evaluated false. And again, to break down the else statement in Python, it's composed of a keyword, else, obviously. It's got a colon at the end of the information that's presented. And again, the block underneath that else keyword is going to be indented. When we look at the flow chart for that, it's a little more difficult. In this state, or a little more complicated, if you will, our start, our end, Alice, if name equals Alice, in this case true, we're going to print hi Alice, and we're going to quit. However, with an else statement thrown in, if name is not equal to Alice, hence it's evaluated false, then we're going to print hello stranger. So it gives us an option again to accomplish some task if our initial flow control statement is evaluated false. The next option that we have with our if flow control statement is an else if. And the key word is ELIF, all together, all lowercase. If or else if, wait a minute. Okay, now I know what I mean. It's going to follow either an if or an else statement as we go through. My rule of thumb, I usually like to end with the else statement. However you want to get into your coding is perfectly fine with me. And again, it's going to check to see if the previous statement was false, and if it was, then it's going to activate. One of the things that we need to look at with else if is evaluated true, then that will normally end whatever options have to happen under the else if. That will normally end that entire flow control statement. Question?
Is that basically how you would do like a case structure?
You could, if you're familiar with case structures out of C++ and C#, yes, very similar. Very similar. And I think we get into that about chapter 3 or 4 in the textbook, so that's coming up.
So if the if-else statements are false, then it executes the else-if statement?
Yes.
Okay.
Use else as a way to not have a loose end.
You do, very well put. Else allows us not to have a loose end. If everything's evaluated false, maybe we want the end user to know that whatever they put in or whatever they didn't work. So it ties up that loose end and says, hey, dummy, go back and check the instructions. You didn't do it right. Obviously, we would not say, hey, dummy. We'd use some other endearing term for end users. All right, Python keywords, very simple. The keyword is ELIF, usually read as else if. It's going to be evaluated again as a true-false condition, very simply, and as predicted, it's going to have a colon at the end of the line, and it's also going to be indented. So you can see the indentation process where PyCharm automatically indents for us once it recognizes those key words, can keep it straight as we're going through. A little more detailed in what we look at as a flow control chart, and now we've added another decision point. In this case is Alice's age less than 12. And you can look at the options on the screen to see what happens. If it's Alice, we print hi Alice. If the age is less than 12, you're not Alice. All right, so it gives us, again, some options. Can be a little cumbersome to work with, but in the cases where you need to use an if flow control statement, this will take care of you and do an exceptional job for you. Couple of additional notes on this process that might help you in the future. The order of multiple if statements really doesn't matter. Why? Somebody take a guess.
It's going to take whichever one it fulfills.
Take whichever one is true,
Yeah.
and it's going to do the operation, and then it's going to bail out of that if flow control. All right, so whatever order we want to put them in is absolutely fine. Let's see, and after, this one's kind of important, after the last else if statement can be an else statement. So if all of your different else if statements evaluate false, then you want to do this. Go back, check your facts, and re-enter the data that you just entered. Maybe something you want to talk to the end user about. All right. We're going to do a little project called Alice's Restaurant. Let me talk you through the requirement first, and then the first part we'll do together. The second part will constitute a little quiz for you this morning in class. If you have no clue about Alice's Restaurant, in the content folder for week 3, there's a link out to a YouTube video that will explain what's going on with Alice's Restaurant. And I won't say that. I won't speak badly of my college years as an undergrad. All right. What we want to set up is a series of if-else statements. So, and the requirement is, if turkey is ordered, print that turkey is not available at Alice's restaurant. For any other order, we'll print that selection name. So go ahead and fire up PyCharm before I bring up the first one. As you're thinking, though, what are you going to have to do? What's going to be necessary? Right now, we can do this program in 3 lines. What do you need? Okay. Very good. We need one other line of code. We need the input, right. So when you get your PyCharm up, however you have your header set, line 8, line 10 and 11 is what you need to enter first. If it's hard to see in the back of the room, we have seating up front for 4 people. I can enlarge it slightly, but not very much. Next, we want to add our first if statement. So if my order equals steak, remember double equals sign, print Alice has a nice T-bone steak today. If you haven't, go ahead and run your program. Enter turkey. It should print out Alice is out of turkey. Enter steak, and it should print Alice has a nice T-bone steak. Yes, you have to rerun the program each time. We'll deal with that on Thursday. And then enter carrots and see what happens. So what happened when you entered carrots? Nothing, all right? Therefore, we need to add our else statement. And the else statement, very simply, print, sorry, Alice's can't fill your order. First. Ponder this. What happens if you enter, that one didn't work right. What happens if you enter turkey with a capital T right now, before you make the change?
It'll print,
Sorry, we can't fill your order. So what we can do is we can add another criteria to be checked with our if condition. And the way we do that is add to what we already have on the if line, or my order equals turkey with a capital T. Go ahead and add that to your code. So now we can see how to solve some problems that we might run into if we're writing this for an end user and they may or may not use a capital letter. There are some other ways that we can handle a problem like this. We'll look at that as we get into the textbook around, I think it's chapter 5 or 6. Go ahead and I want you to add the following to your code. Add in carrots, add in potatoes, and this time I want you to use the format command that we learned last week to indicate what Alice has available for you. So you write each of the else if statements, but instead of putting in the word carrot, you're going to use the format. Remember dot format? Use that command to display what is available. Most of you have finished typing, so this is what we have. I may not have asked the question correctly, but we're using, again, the format command with our input value. In my case, I'm using the variable my order, and then I can print that out without having to type in what's being ordered.
I didn't know we were supposed to change them all.
Well, you're going to get to change them all again, so don't rush. Let's take a look at the code now, and what's cumbersome about this code? What are some problems that you see? What if I told you that turkey is the only thing that Alice's does not have that's on their menu? Everything else is always available. How could you simplify that code?
You could just change it to one, if else statement, or else if statement, where, so it would just say,
Okay? Very good. So what we need to look at before we start doing that is a quick review of something we talked about last week, and that is comparison operators. They're comparing two values. Now, right now we've used the double equal sign in our if and if-else statements, but there are other operators that we can use. Remember, we resolved down to Boolean values, and our operators are if this is equal to or not equal to, then less than, greater than, less than, equal to, or greater than equal to. Should be one more slide here. So here's what I want you to do. Put some thought into it, and I want you to streamline this script. Go ahead and print the script on a PDF and print the script run on a PDF. And I've set up a Dropbox in D2L. It's actually named Alice's Restaurant Part 1. So when you get done with the PDFs, you get your code done and printed, go ahead and put them in the Dropbox. There should be an option, I've asked for an option on each of these computers to print a PDF, so you should have that there. I'll give you one more hint. You can write this entire program in 5 lines of code. Any questions? Use any reference you want. Don't ask your neighbor, please.
Can you explain what you want again?
Yeah.
I want you to simplify the script.
The turkey, the steaks, carrots.
Your turkey is going to have to be the same. So what you're looking at is how can you simplify the else if or the else statement to cover everything else with the knowledge that anything else that's ordered, with the exception of turkey, is always available at Alice's Restaurant. Okay? Have I still got you stumped?
When you say everything, you mean like
Anything you would type in that's a food item, other than turkey, is always going to be available at Alice's. And remember, you have to print out what was ordered. Give it some thought. You have until 12:15, which is a little less than 45 minutes. If you really get stumped as a group, I'll give you another hint. By the way, there are some people that didn't sign in. I'll put the list up here.